So Notre Dame left out of the playoff after finishing the season with 10 straight wins. There you see the bracket. They have a season opening loss to Miami. It wasn't enough. The Hurricanes, on the other hand, became the third team in the playoff era to move into the field on Selection Day without winning its conference championship. Moments ago, Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bevacqua was on with Dan Patrick and had this to say.
We have no gripes about any of the schools in the ACC, but we were mystified by the actions of the conference to attack, their biggest really business partner in football and a member of their conference in 24 of our other sports. And I would tell you, Dan, I wouldn't be honest with you if I didn't say that they have certainly done permanent damage to the relationship between the conference and Notre Dame.
What do you mean?
Just we didn't appreciate the fact that we were singled out repeatedly and compared to Miami. Not by Miami. Miami has every right to do that. But it raised a lot of eyebrows here that the conference was taking shots at us. And, that's just not something we chose to do. We wouldn't choose to do that in the future, and people might disagree with us, but that's just not something that we'd be comfortable with.
Paul Finebaum joins us now here on First Take. And Paul, you just heard Pete's comments there about the way ACC handled things with Notre Dame. What's your reaction?
This is the biggest story of the day, Shay, because he laid it out brilliantly, and someone in Charlotte at the ACC office has some serious explaining to do, because not only did they pile on social media, they used their own network to replay, the ACC network, to replay the Notre Dame-Miami game every hour on the hour. And whether you agree or disagree with Notre Dame being in the field, and we'll talk about that, and it's been talked about, the fact that the Notre Dame athletic director is essentially saying permanent damage, that means we don't want anything to do with you anymore. And just to repeat, Notre Dame's a member of the ACC and everything but football. And in football, they play 5 conference games. That's incredibly valuable if you're Wake Forest or Duke or North Carolina or North Carolina State. So the real story today coming out of this is, are they going to get out of the ACC, and will the Big Ten or the SEC, will the Big Ten or the SEC suddenly say, hey, Notre Dame, we can figure out a way?
And Commissioner Phillips has only been on the job since 2021. We get that part. I understand if you're the Notre Dame athletic director, how you would feel. I respect where he's coming from. But my question, Paul, and it's more rhetorical than anything else, but I don't mind you and Cam answering it, is that for the purposes of the college football playoffs, who is the commissioner supposed to look out for? Is he supposed to look out for teams within the conference, or a team that's associated with this conference in every other sport, but in the absolute major sport, which is college football, they want nothing to do with the ACC or anybody else because they wanted to maintain their independence? What is owed to you if you are not a part of the conference? Now, if Miami wasn't on the bubble, then I get where he's coming from. You understand? In other words, it's got nothing to do with the ACC. Mind your business. We're associated with you in every way. And matter of fact, you should look at us as a teammate. I got that part, if that didn't exist. But there was speculation that Miami would not make it because Notre Dame would get picked ahead of them. You're the ACC. You don't want that, because in the #1 money-making sport in college, Miami is associated with the ACC. They were looking out for themselves. It's like the AD is coming on the Dan Patrick show and chastising a conference that they refuse to be associated with in the sport of football for speaking up on behalf of a university that does want to be associated with them with football, is associated with them with football, and they stand to gain profitability from Miami's participation in the CFP, whereas if Notre Dame had been there, there's nothing that goes to the ACC from Notre Dame because of Notre Dame's independence. That's like you, Cam. I'm like, yo, man, we got a couple of people, all right? I got a couple of people that want to associate themselves with me. And guess what? It's Uncle Paulie and it's Cam, right? And y'all gonna make some money for me. But there's somebody on the outside that don't want anything to do with me in this particular sport, and I'm not supportive of him. I'm supporting y'all, even though I got an association with him with everything else other than football. I just don't understand. I think it comes across as a bit petulant for the AD of Notre Dame to be whining about this. It makes perfect sense if you remember the ACC with football. But this is football we're talking about, and Notre Dame is independent, and they have no relationship with the ACC. So what does the ACC owe them when it comes to football? The answer to that is nothing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot to kind of unpack here, but I have a question for Uncle Paulie here. In a time where you would think that the best should play the best for removing all doubt during these times of the year, at the end of the year, knowing that the college football committee will be able to say, hey, this team beat that team. We're going to take it out of the computers or the analytics. Going back during the time when I was playing, you had the AP poll, you had the coaches poll, you had BCS kind of metrics that they were going off of. Now you put it in real people's hands to make decisions. Why are we seeing teams like Alabama, amongst other teams, to say our non-conference games will not be, so built up to have competition, more so to pamper our record at the end of the season, rather than taking it to say, hey, we want to play a Notre Dame. We want to play a team that we think is going to be one of those teams in the college football playoffs at the end of the year, rather than saying a more easier or lesser opponent?
Well, Cam, I'll address that and Stephen A's. The real problem with what's happening now is that the big schools are moving away from the big-time games because they found out this year they don't really help. Look at Ohio State and Texas. Biggest game of the year on week one. It cost Texas a berth in the playoffs. Stephen A., back to what you said, though, another part of what the ACC interplay is that the ACC, and frankly, everyone in college football should adhere to the same rule, and that is the combatants in your championship game should be the highest ranked schools according to the most important poll, which is the CFP poll. Had that happened, Miami would have been in the game, and that would have solved all the problems of Miami. As far as Notre Dame, I agree with a lot of what you said about the Notre Dame AD, but the real problem here was the ACC and all of these leagues putting out all this propaganda that, quite frankly, nobody read. The only deleterious aspect of that is it affected Notre Dame's feelings about their relationship with the ACC. But to make this even more complex, this is ultimately Notre Dame's fault. They have only themselves to blame. They can be upset with the ACC and they can throw a hissy fit, but they should be in a conference. And what's interesting is, remember during COVID, they were in a conference. They had nobody to play, so they joined the ACC on a one-year basis, played in the championship game, and made it to the CFP. But then when it came back to reality the next year, they said, we're too good for you. We'll play you in all the other sports, but not football.
Okay, I hear what everyone's saying.
And that's a big deal, Paul. Hold on, Shay. That's a big deal, because that adds an additional layer to what I said. Oh, so in recent memory, you did a one-year deal with us and then basically said we're too good for you. You understand what I'm saying? We got our media rights deal, okay? We got the scheduling freedom for big-name games and stuff. The revenue, by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Paulie. Here's the deal, Paul. Isn't it true? Whether it's Georgia, whether it's Ohio State, whether it's Oregon, whether it's Texas Tech or anybody, that those teams have to share some of the revenue they generate from being participants in the college football playoffs with their conference. I believe that's the case. So if that's the case, guess who the lone team is that doesn't have to do that? That would have been Notre Dame, correct? So I'm looking at it and it's like everything you do is to your advantage. Everything you do is propagandist, but then the ACC mimics your behavior, essentially, looking out for themselves. And you going on Dan Patrick's radio show and telling the world that they did irreparable harm to you? That's a lot of nerve. That's what I'm saying. That's a lot of nerve.
But isn't part of the problem, the reason they're in this situation is because they have to play, 5 ACC teams, and the ACC wasn't good this year? Like the win over Pittsburgh, we're all counting it as like not a great win. Well, they had to play them because they're in the ACC. Now, they ended up losing to Miami, of course, in week 1 back in August. But a lot of this is because of the ACC. Can't the ACC build their conference up without putting down Notre Dame? I feel like I'm talking to toddlers. Like, can't we do that? Can't we still congratulate Miami instead of put down? I just don't understand the benefit. It made no sense to me.
Well, Shay. Well, Paul, go ahead and answer it first. Paul, answer it first. I'll follow up.
Well, no, I mean, Shay, you're right. But ultimately, it is just a big conundrum. And one other thing, though, Shay, Notre Dame makes all that money off that NBC contract. But does anybody watch these games? No. On the week of their biggest game of the year against Southern Cal, I think, if I have this correctly, they lost in the ratings to LSU and Vanderbilt on ABC. The problem is Notre Dame is just not, I mean, they think they're great, but they're not. They're not the draw they used to be. And that has nothing to do with the playoffs, Stephen A. It just has to do with the fact that their brand, as good as they think they are, aren't as big as the SEC brand or even the Big Ten brand.
They're not as big as the SEC or the Big Ten brand, but nevertheless, somehow, some way, they still got their national television contract as an independent with NBC. The other thing that I would say is this. Marcus Freeman is a hell of a coach. We all got love for him, respect for him and the job they did. It was a national championship game last year. But in the end, when we're talking about the 2 highest ranked teams, well, guess what? If you had an association, more of a direct association with the ACC, it might have been you and Miami in the conference championship game instead of Virginia and the Duke Blue Devils. So we got to look at all of these different things when it comes down to it. Shay, I get where you're coming from. And it's, again, when we talk about, you're talking to guys, people that should be grown-ups. The flip side is if you're the ACC, what are you doing? You're trying to appeal to the college football playoff committee, because they're the ones that's going to make this decision leading up to Sunday. And so you're thinking about what they're thinking about. You're thinking about what it's going to take to appeal to them and influence them to see your side. And if we're being straight up, it worked. It worked. So, I mean, I can't knock them for doing it. They recognized what it was going to take to influence the committee, and that's what they catered to. And as a result, Miami is in and Notre Dame is out. Stop being an independent. Join a damn conference.
It worked,
how about that?
But you pissed off a partner. I mean, I don't know. Did it work fully? We'll find out. Listen, after a late fourth quarter turnover by Caleb Williams, do we still believe he can carry the Bears into a deep playoff one, returning the page and going back to the NFL? We'll discuss it next.
I can't do this. Don't